Government on August 8 laid its Green Paper on the Natural Resource Fund in the National Assembly. This document presents initial proposals to stimulate discussions and outlines specific issues and possible courses of action in terms of policy and legislation as it relates to the management of the petroleum sector. In this InfoHub Extended, Stacey Carmichael examines some of the key features of the Green Paper. She looks at how the government will prudently manage this emerging sector with specially designed financial rules and the establishment of a single natural resource fund.
The future of Guyana has never looked better. Our nation is on the cusp of a development program like never seen before. While Guyana is now emerging as an energy giant through the discovery of massive reserves of oil and natural gas, it is your government's intention that the huge benefits emerging from this will go where it matters most, to you, the people of this beloved country. There is a surge of confidence in the way Guyana is governed once again, and the level of investor interest is unprecedented. Guyana is poised to become the breadbasket of the region, and the pace at which this nation will grow through prudent fiscal management will be nothing short of impressive. But more than anything else will be the way every Guyanese, regardless of color, class, or creed, becomes a part of this historic period of national transformation, sharing in the wealth and well-being of it all as one Guyana.
The government's Green Paper titled Managing Future Petroleum Revenues and Establishment of a Fiscal Rule and a Sovereign Wealth Fund was tabled by Minister of Finance Winston Jordan during the 96th sitting of the National Assembly on August 8. The Green Paper was prepared at the request of President David Granger. It aims to capture key issues for consideration, including mechanisms to ensure the sustainable use of petroleum revenues to achieve a diversified and green economy. There is a specific concerted effort to avoid mismanagement of these resources that is referred to as the resource curse. Often, countries with an abundance of natural resources tend to have less economic growth, less democracy, and worse development outcomes than countries with fewer natural resources. Minister Jordan described the laying of the Green Paper as a demonstration of the administration's commitment to good governance and accountability as it relates to the management of the petroleum resources.
In the interest of good governance, I anticipate that no member of this Honourable House will argue against the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund. Sovereign wealth funds play a crucial role in the management of natural resource revenues of the magnitude that Guyana is likely to experience. Generally speaking, resource-rich countries with a well-managed sovereign wealth fund and clear fiscal rules fare much better than those without.
Stabilization, savings, and domestic development are the key objectives of the fund, and the fiscal rule options outlined in the Green Paper are designed to achieve these objectives. Noting the uncertainty surrounding the future of fossil fuels, Minister Jordan emphasized the need for savings to begin from the first day of production.
Commodity prices are volatile, and two, production levels can be difficult to predict. These two factors can result in unstable revenue and, by extension, government spending, which will negatively impact the stability and scale of social programs and interventions. To achieve this, a portion of revenues will be invested in safe and liquid assets external to the domestic economy. Mr. Speaker, the second key function of our sovereign wealth fund is savings, to ensure the equitable distribution of benefits of the extraction of non-renewable resources across current and future generations. This will allow for the transformation of a depleting asset base, that is oil, to a permanent asset base, that is financial assets. This also allows for public spending during resource extraction to be maintained or increased long after extraction has ended. Given the uncertainty surrounding the future of fossil fuels, it is necessary for savings to begin from day one of production. To achieve this function, revenues will be invested in diversified portfolio comprised of financial assets external to the domestic economy with long investment horizons and higher expected returns.
The government is committed to effectively managing oil revenues through the establishment of the Natural Resource Fund with a clear fiscal rule. This policy should contribute to strong, sustainable, long-term economic growth.
We must save for current and future generations, but this has to be balanced with the need to invest to overcome the human and physical and technological capital constraint that restricts Guyana from realizing her full growth potential. For example, there are significant infrastructure gaps that exist, especially with respect to connecting the coast and the hinterland, and these need to be addressed. But we must also be cognizant of the capacity of the domestic economy to absorb significant increases in expenditure, as well as the capacity of the public service to effectively and efficiently implement expanded programs and deliver quality services.
The Finance Minister reminded that in 2016, after the announcement of the first discovery, Minister of Natural Resources Raphael Trotman engaged the Commonwealth Secretariat to assist in the drafting of the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation. The Finance Ministry then followed through with this engagement at President Granger's directive to continue the crafting of this key legislation.
In 2016, months after the first discovery, the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources quite wisely engaged the Commonwealth Secretariat to assist in drafting the Sovereign Wealth Fund legislation. In 2017, the Ministry of Finance continued this engagement after being charged by His Excellency President David Granger with the responsibility for piloting this important piece of legislation through this Honorable House.
The government believes the establishment of the single fund, the Natural Resource Fund, or NRF, will be the most effective, efficient, and transparent mechanism for achieving multiple objectives of intergenerational savings, stabilization, and investment in development priorities. Historically, in recognizing the need to both save and spend incoming oil revenues while ensuring future generations benefit, the establishment of a sovereign wealth fund was proposed as a solution. However, the government, after careful examination of several factors, including the additional administrative costs of establishing two funds and examples of countries that established multiple sovereign wealth funds but have not managed their natural resource revenues effectively, concluded that a single NRF will be able to meet the country's needs.
According to the Green Paper, a single fund can achieve multiple objectives with a robust fiscal rule. Establishing an SWF is relatively complex and there can be substantial administrative costs. Government reasoned that if two separate funds are established, it will require two governance structures, two investment policies, investment mandates, two sets of accounts, and two external audits.
Two funds would also need detailed rules for transferring money between the funds and the national budget. In addition, it would be unwise to spread the limited expertise and experience in fund management in Guyana across two separate funds, the paper stated. Importantly, economic modeling also demonstrates that with Guyana's proposed fiscal rule, known as the Economically and Fiscally Sustainable Amount Rule, a single fund will lead to economic stabilization and substantial long-term savings while avoiding increased administrative costs that establishing multiple funds would entail. The government said case studies of Botswana, Norway, and Nigeria show that having multiple funds is no guarantee of achieving the savings and stabilization objectives.
The Natural Resource Fund Act will allow the establishment of the fund to effectively and efficiently manage natural resource wealth for the benefit of future and current generations of Guyana.
The government proposes in a Green Paper that this will be done by 1. Contributing to economic stabilization, ensuring that volatility in natural resource revenues does not lead to volatile public spending, and ensuring that natural resource revenues do not lead to a loss of economic competitiveness. 2. Fairly transferring natural resource wealth across generations to ensure that future generations benefit from these resources. And 3. Using natural resource wealth to finance development priorities via the national budget as identified in the National Development Strategy towards an inclusive green economy. The Green Paper explains that petroleum revenues as well as excess revenues from mining and forestry will be deposited into the Natural Resource Fund. This will be a US dollar bank account at the Bank of Guyana, from which withdrawals will be made based on the fiscal rule.
We must avoid the resource course at all costs. To do this, we must manage injections to domestic spending. And when we do invest, we must ensure that these investments are catalytic and promote economic diversification so that we realize an economy that is strong and resilient, that can stand on its own long after oil has been depleted. Within the principles of good financial management, these investments will be guided by the National Development Plan, our Green State Development Strategy, and executed via the national budget, as occurs in countries that have been successful in harnessing effectively natural resource revenue for development, such as Norway and Botswana. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal rule options that allow for these three objectives to be met emerged after considering many other fiscal rules that were implemented with varying degrees of effectiveness. The proposed options have benefited from sensitivity analysis testing across various factors, including prices and production. We are confident that the fiscal rule that is eventually decided upon will serve the needs of current and future generations. It will hold the promise to be a model for other countries to emulate, especially given its potential to achieve the many goals already mentioned, a feat that only few countries have achieved.
The Green Paper explains that withdrawals from the Natural Resource Fund will be deposited into the Consolidated Fund to form part of the financing streams of the annual budget along with loans, tax and non-tax revenues. Government will then determine development priorities based on the Costed Green State Development Strategy, GSDS, and the available income envelope. From 2020, when oil production is slated to begin, the income envelope will consist of petroleum revenues, loans, grants, tax and non-tax revenues. Government will prioritize catalytic investments to transform communities, regions and the country as a whole within the context of the measurable targets identified in the GSDS.
The government, as outlined in its Green Paper, says the Natural Resource Fund will ensure stability in economic spending, savings for future generations, and the financing of critical development projects. All revenues from petroleum will be deposited into the fund, and withdrawals, which will be based on a fiscal rule, cannot exceed the amount approved by the National Assembly as part of the annual budget proposal. Join us for another InfoHub Extended as we continue to highlight government's proposals for the petroleum sector as outlined in the Green Paper. Goodbye.
Roundabouts. Approaching a roundabout. When you approach a roundabout, you must use your indicator if you intend to turn left or right or make a U-turn at the roundabout. You must give other road users sufficient notice of your intent to turn. Entering a roundabout. When entering a roundabout, you must slow or stop to give way to any vehicle already in the roundabout. You must also continue to use your indicators if you intend to turn left or right or make a U-turn. Turning left. When turning left, you must indicate left on approach and be travelling in the left-hand lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Stay in the left lane and exit in the left lane. Turning right. When turning right, you must indicate right on approach and be travelling in the right-hand lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Making a U-turn. When using a roundabout to make a U-turn, you must approach in the right lane and signal right. Changing lanes in a roundabout. Drivers may change lanes in a roundabout if they wish. The usual road rules for changing lanes apply. You must use your indicator and give way to any vehicle in the lane you are entering. Going straight ahead. You don't need to signal when approaching the roundabout if you are going straight ahead. You may approach the roundabout from either the left or right lane unless there are road markings with other instructions. Exiting a roundabout. As when you exit a road, you must signal left when leaving a roundabout, if it is practical to do so, and you should stop indicating as soon as you have exited the roundabout. However, when you are travelling straight ahead on a small single-lane roundabout, it may be impractical to indicate when exiting.